audience. Yeah, what's up? What's up? What's up? We're back here at the Dimelo Cinema Club. It is I, JP. This movie has wrecked me so much that I am not on screen. This is what you're gonna get. Hope you dig it. Hope you like it. It's a beautiful face, and I am joined, of course, with Jason Eccles, Raymond Arturo Perez, and Steve Dales. I guess the movie killed half our crew because, oh my god, they are not with us today. What movie did we watch? You ask. Oh, we saw the great 2003 movie Old Boy, which now completes our Vengeance trilogy. It is the second movie of the Vengeance trilogy. It's an anthology series. They're not connected they're only connected in theme, and there's a few theories on like how the films are also connected in the same world and whatnot. We'll probably talk about it in this review because there was a few things I caught. I was like, that feels awfully familiar. But the film is about a man by Dae-Su Oh, who is kidnapped and held against his will for 15 years, not knowing what's going on. And then he suddenly is released without question. And the point of the movie is he tries to figure out who and why he was held captive for 15 years. Lots of twists and turns in this epic movie. If you haven't seen it yet, you got to see. Okay, I'm going to say it right now. We'll give our initial thoughts. But after that, if you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. Because, if you're used to us talking about movies, we're going to delve into a lot of spoiler territory. And I got to say, I knew a bit of what happened in the movie before watching the movie, and it did kind of ruin the experience for me personally. So we'll give our first impressions. We'll try to give out as few spoilers as we can during our initial thoughts. And after that, I recommend to just pause the video, watch it, and then come back 3 hours later. So let's start off with Jason. What's up? You, I think out of all of us are actually more familiar with this movie, I believe, from what I can recall, unless I am wrong.
You might be right about that. So I did introduce the first two Vengeance movies as part of this trilogy because I've always wanted to see them and I hadn't seen them before. So you guys have shared all of this with me now. That's great. I am curious before I give my initial impression, though, PJ. You said that or excuse me, JP. You said that you saw this. You knew the ending of this movie before you started watching it? Had you already seen it, or did you just know the ending?
I just knew the ending because I was a dum-dum and watched one of those silly top 10 moments in cinema, and this movie happened to be in one of those top 10s.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, knowing how this movie ends does feel a big punch in the gut away from this film and what it's able to do. Because that final twist is a doozy. It might be one of the most dooziest twists in cinematic history. Even including the Sixth Sense. Because this one's wild. This is not my first time watching this film. I've seen it before. I don't know how many times I've seen it. This is at least my third or fourth time, probably. But I hadn't seen it in a really long time. This movie kind of came to me from like a cinephile, someone who recommended that I see it because I hadn't seen any of the director's work. But I also own this film, and I bought this from like a bargain bin or a DVD store that was going out of business or whatever. And one of the captions on it says "Arrives with the Quentin Tarantino seal of approval," and I can see that. You can see it all over this thing that Tarantino loves this movie for sure. It's a weird film, man, and it's very Korean in nature. And I think you have to understand a little bit of Korean culture to really understand what's happening. Otherwise, you're going to have more questions. Not more questions where, it's impossible to enjoy it. You're just going to wonder, like, hey, I wonder why that's happening, or what's that choice about? But yeah, this is a wild journey, man. Also, I've owned this movie for a really long time, but I never looked at the inserts inside, and then I discovered this.
Whoa! Look at that!
a sympathy for Mr. Vengeance poster inside the old boy DVD case. So I thought that was kind of fun. Um, Never hung it on my wall or anything. Maybe one day I'll get it autographed. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So this being my first new impression of the film, I gotta say it holds up in a lot of ways. Cinematography wise, I remember thinking this film was just dark and beautiful. And I suppose it still is. Like a lot of films have sort of copied what this thing has done now. Um, like the look of it, at least, I feel like has been like done a lot, especially in Korean cinema. Uh, but this thing is it's a crazy wild journey, and I just this time watching it, I was thinking more about the writing of it, and I was like, who writes a thing like this? Where does it come from? Like, where in the ether, like, does this come from? And like, what was the initial idea? Because there's like 3 or 4 moments in the movie, I think, where you would think like, as someone who's creating this story, this was the initial idea, whether it be the imprisonment part, whether it be the weird twist ending, whether it be the actual revenge sequences. Um, this thing takes you on a ride, and I just would really like to know how the creator writer arrived at certain parts of this thing. Like that's like what I was kind of focused on this time for the first time as I watched it. So that's what I think about this. The violence in this thing is still pretty gruesome, even though I thought maybe they showed more like gruesome parts of it, like the teeth pulling scene. I thought maybe they showed it in more details, but I remember like watching this like so long ago, thinking like, "Wow, that's crazy gruesome." But we've seen things since that are more gruesome. Um, but this thing, like I said, it's a wild ride, man, and there's still a lot to love about this movie. Um, and I really do want to know you guys' impressions of it because this is one of those things where I feel like you love this movie. Like I feel like anyone who watches it would love it, but I don't know if everyone can handle it. So that's my impression. That's my initial thought this time around.
That is definitely, I agree to all points of that. We're gonna pass the baton to Raymond. What up, Raymond?
Howdy. Um, so this is my first intro to the Vengeance trilogy. This film had been on my list for a long while. Glad I finally get it off the list. My initial thoughts were, oh, this is very kind of quirky and playful, and then goes from quirky and playful to just sinister and very like kind of comic book-y vibes. And somewhere along the lines, I just was like a little overwhelmed implies that it's doing a lot for, well, yeah, both overwhelmed with how like seemingly straight male it gets, and then underwhelmed by that as well.
Yeah,
Uh Especially the whole like, and it well it all, it's hard to argue it sometimes because it's like, well, you created this character, so at least it makes sense to what you've created. But on the flip side, just being like, "Ugh, but it's so dumb." I don't know. Um, like like when he tries to essentially, I mean, he gets the green light to do it again in the future, but when he first tries to have sex with the woman, he was raping her, and then she's like, no, anytime you do it, like, just go. But I was just like, this feels so like not like, you know, whatever.
I know
uh,
what you're saying.
but and then we get the reverse of that when it's oh, I forget, because I just also on my never mind, unrelated. But there was like an article that came up about something with like inmates being at a male female prison, and then someone bribes somebody. It's wild. Anyway, it was a lot. So those are my initial thoughts. I think the cinematography, to what you were saying earlier, is so just snazzy, like, it's so beautiful. I don't watch a lot of like action thriller films, and then kind of I do, but I do. The thing that popped up into my head when he was battling the like 30 people in the hallway, um, was that I think when Daredevil had this like long shot, Daredevil the TV series had this long shot in one of the finales or penultimate episode that everyone was like raving about, and I think the director came out and said like, "Oh, that's my homage to Old Boy." I think they said that, or if they didn't say that, then everyone else was like, "Oh, this is very Old Boy," and you turned it into Daredevil. So it's neat. It's neat because I think a lot of people do reference this, um, especially that seems, it just seems like a natural thing now to have that like kind of swooping action long shot for a while, with a bunch of fighting choreography. I love that it feels realistic too in this. Like, it gets slow. They're tired. He's beaten up. It's not like superhero. It's like, this feels like a human trying to be a superhero.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then I mean, these. I'm just covering the whole film now, but I'll just stop. Bye.
No, it's all
Bye.
good. We'll get back to it. Don't leave. Don't leave us. All right, well, we'll talk more in depth in the movie and like all the little things because like I kind of feel you, I get you, but like once we finish our initial thoughts, we will delve into those points later. So Des, I think you got a spoiler for us too, don't you? Oh no!
Yes, my spoiler is that I only watched half of this movie. Which half? The first half, because I am intelligent. Uh, but I'm definitely gonna be spoiled here, and that's fine. That's okay. Uh, Initial thoughts. I honestly thought that just based on me actually being part of the cinema club and watch the first two of the trilogy, I thought this was going to be way more gruesome than what it actually was. So, in that aspect, I was extremely grateful that it wasn't as gruesome as the first couple films. Go ahead, Raymond.
Are the other two actually more gruesome? And also, every time y'all say this, and I meant to say this during my initial thoughts, that quote that they say throughout the film keeps looping in my head of the whole like, if you, I mean, it's the English translation and then it's my translation of how I remember it, but it's
Yeah.
like, the more you imagine it, the more like afraid you'll be.
Yeah.
Because I was like, so like, because it is so violent, I was like, oh, they're actually not showing me that much, which is interesting.
I think the other two films, like to be honest, they have their own little taglines as well. They do delve into philosophy and whatnot. And actually, I'll agree with Des. I felt that compared to the other two films, it's definitely not as gruesome or as action packed.
Mm.
But I feel out of the three, this one is the much more personal and intimate of the trilogy, which is probably why I think this one stands out and more people know of this film as well. Plus the really, really big twist. Oh boy.
Yeah, this movie is more weird than the other two in what the lead character has to deal with. And like being locked away for 15 years at the beginning of the movie, and we don't see why he gets locked away. We don't see him get locked away. We don't know why he's there. He doesn't know why he's there. So we're really on the journey with them. The other two movies don't really have those elements. They are more gruesome in their violence. Maybe had this movie shown the gruesome aspects of it the way the other two did, this one might have been the more gruesome. But the fact that they didn't show the teeth pulling or the hammer hitting people in the head, you know what I mean? Like, had they shown those things, like, yeah, this thing may have topped them. But this thing has those elements that are more memorable because we've never really seen them in film before this, I don't think. So it kind of just like this thing just stands out as these things where like even if you don't remember much of the movie, after you see it one time, you're never allowed to forget it.
For sure, for sure.
Steve, I interrupted you. What you were going through are your initial thoughts. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, just super mega quick. Just my initial thoughts. It was cool to see a Korean version of Johnny Depp.
Oh my.
Oh, nobody thought that. Nobody thought that. Only
That's
me.
a hot take. That's an interesting take.
That was an interesting take. And just like Raymond mentioned, for some reason, I don't know why, when, where, what, but the moment I saw the fighting scene, I was like, I seen this before.
Mm.
I don't know where, I don't know
Mhm.
why. I never seen the trailer for this movie. I always go watch the movie Cold Turkey. But I for some reason seen that sequence before. I don't know if it was like one of those things that JP was mentioning, one of those top 10 or whatever it was. But the moment that came on, I was like, I seen this. And this is like iconic. Uh, and just like Raymond said, like it definitely felt more realistic in the sense of the tiredness and like the moment they're like, is he dead? And then he wakes up again and stuff like that. It's still very unbelievable that like one guy can knock off so many people. But you know, that's where you suspend your disbelief a little bit. But yeah, first impressions, it was great. I wish I would have finished the movie, but unfortunately, your boy had a rough week, so I couldn't. But looking forward to y'all's reviews.
Awesome,
Right.
awesome. And so for my final, for my initial thought, I'll try to do this quick. Yes, I like I stated before. I believe this one is probably not as action packed or as violent as Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or Lady Vengeance, but like this one, like when you find like when you gotta watch the movie. You really do. There's a reason why. Everyone knows about it narratively. There's a reason why Dez knew that scene without even seeing the movie first. But also it's weird because I know people have like those things where like, oh yeah, I watched them in chronological order. Like I think the way that we saw it was pretty okay. We could watch Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance and then end it with the Old Boy. That's how I would recommend watching it. It's
I
a
would too, actually.
gets get all the craziness first and then like just the dark, just dark emotional crap last. So that's my first impressions and initial thoughts. Let's talk about. I kind of want to talk about story and just like the sheer brutality of this movie. Let's talk about that. Let's start this at a 10. Let's talk about the brutality of this film, especially since it is a common theme with the other two movies. Like it is a trilogy of vengeance, unrelenting, unmerciful vengeance. What do you guys what do you guys think about this film? This Quentin Tarantino approved movie when it comes to the violence and just sheer brutality of it.
I mean, I feel like at this point in my life, both fictionally and nonfiction related, we've been exposed to so much violence. So it didn't actually feel that bad. I was mentally prepared, especially when the fighting sequence started coming into play, of like, all right, like maybe we might have to close our eyes. But I never did. I didn't feel like I needed to. They usually pulled away. And I had to use my imagination. So I thought it was okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that I would agree with that. I remember the first time I saw this, kind of having those sort of pull away moments and just thinking like, how gruesome is this? He's hitting people with the business end of a hammer and the spike end of a hammer, and like he's like, and just the idea of that when I first saw this movie, probably I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, 14 years ago or something. I just remember thinking like, wow, this is crazy. I've never seen a guy go through a whole movie and his weapon is a hammer. You know what I mean? Like an actual, not sword, but an actual carpenter's hammer. Like I just remember thinking that was insane. Because it's usually a gun.
Mm.
A friend of mine, I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine many years ago, and I'm telling him about that scene, and he's like, "Well, you know why that scene even exists?" And I'm like, "Well, what? Why? Like, why doesn't he just use a gun? Like, this whole movie could have been over a lot faster if he just had a gun." He goes, "Because there's no guns in Korea. They outlawed guns years ago, so no one in the movie has guns." And I'm like,
Excuse me? What?
yeah, see that?
The more you know. Wow, that's wild.
Changes the texture of the movie a bit, doesn't it?
Very,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. But it's also great because I recall the last two, I remember if I'm remembering correctly from Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance, the difference between those two movies and this one was they actually were able to use items and stuff that were intentionally made to be weapons. This one had a lot of like just found object work and whatnot. Like we see someone get sliced up by scissors. We see some, of course, a lot of head bashing with the hammer. Someone gets murked with a broken CD-ROM. That was amazing. I really liked that. I like that scene caught me off guard. That was beautiful. How seemingly casual the person was able to get the CD-ROM, break it into, and you're not even sure what they're gonna do with it, and then they just went away with it. And also the toothbrush, traditional shanking in a prison. I'm pretty sure there's either a John Wick movie or there's an American movie that actually references that scene. It's like, I knew a guy once who walked into a bar, killed two men with a toothbrush, and that's what this guy does. Walks in with a toothbrush, kills two men with it, as like easy peasy lemon squeezy. I also really liked like you see the progression of his time being isolated, how that goes up, like him teaching himself, learning these things in his isolation, for the moment when he finally gets out.
I did give pause to that, especially at least with the English translation, where he's like, here comes the time where I get to see whether my solo training will amount to anything. And I was like, girl, you were hitting a wall. Like, that has nothing to do with your reflexes. So there's that. And then also all these leaps and like bounds he was doing on that first with those like four teenagers or younger looking men with the cigarette. I was like, okay, girl, go off.
I feel like that was kind of like the embodiment of how everyone feels like when they go out of a movie, like a really hardcore movie. It's like, man, I hope someone jumps in right now. And that guy took 15 years of going through that before actually doing something about it.
Yeah, I had the same thought actually. I was thinking like, well, what exactly was he doing in that prison? Because I mean,
there's
maybe
tons of footage where he had, one of those dolls that like comes and swings back. You just must have not seen
the Wing Chun dolls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I was thinking, like, okay, he'll be stronger because he's like, in there like doing push-ups and punching walls or whatever. But then, like, you're right, like reflexes and learning how to throw a punch. Maybe he's in there shadow boxing and he's just going through the motions. Maybe he's seen a lot of like fight stuff on TV. That's what I consider. At least that's how I justified it in my head when I was watching it. Because I'm like, okay, he knows how to fight now. I guess I just have to accept that he learned how to fight by himself in a room, I think also I had some issues with like him still being it was awesome. I remember the first time him beating up like 30 people in a room and beating up people in the elevator because it's all stylized. But just like from a realistic point of view now, I guess I'm looking at it from a different angle. And I'm like, well, probably not. You know what I mean? Like he beat all these people, didn't seem to really kill anybody because they all showed back up at Midu's apartment later to get him, you know. And it's all just very stylized. I do like how the lead villain though comes back in, and this is what feels very comic booky. Like Raymond said, he comes back in and he has the fake platinum teeth or whatever in his mouth, and he just slips a dentist card in the guy's jacket. Like, you're gonna need this. I thought that was pretty out cold. I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty cold way to let somebody know you about to fuck them up. You know what I mean? Give this guy a call once I'm done with you. Like, I thought that was pretty sick. Also, I think his suit held up pretty well. Like, I remember liking that suit a whole lot the first time I seen it, and I'm like, I looked at it now, I'm like, yeah, that suit still holds up 20 years later. Like, it's not a bad suit. It looked good on him.
Yeah, that's that little perks and gifts that he was given for his release. I think it was great though. Like as OP'd as he was, like the movie did show like okay, but he's still a man. Or like he's not Superman. He's still a man. He gets tired during the fight, and then of course the movie has some really cheeky humor. Where the first time he tries to take advantage of Mito, he has the same things like okay, 15 years of me watching like people get it taken advantage on TV, like 15 years of just watching that. Will I be able to do the same with this woman? Nope. Like, nope, doesn't work that way, dude. I mean, she does do that weird turnaround where it's like, oh well, I get it, I understand you're a dude. Maybe later, but like not right now. I'm not in the mood. That could be, I think, narratively we're going into spoiler territory now.
Well, it's totally
Narratively,
cool that we do.
yeah,
I mean, I think we sort of have to if we're going to discuss this thing the way it needs to be discussed.
yeah. So
Well,
I
let
think
me
it
ask you
has
guys
to.
a question. Why does Midu like him so much? Because she likes him right away. How come?
I think the film kind of like the whole. It's kind of like a Deus type thing where you could probably pin it all on the hypnosis. Like as soon as they introduce that into the movie, it's like, oh, maybe it has to do with the hypnosis. They were both hypnotized. Maybe that's why, like, she likes him so much, or she just likes older men. Who knows? I don't know.
I thought like maybe they had like subconsciously planted some stuff like her horoscope or something. Like, oh yeah, a strange man is going to walk into your life and it's going to change your life forever. You know what I mean? Like, I thought like maybe some kind of thing had been like implanted on her before he gets there because that's the only
Yeah.
way it could make any sense to me.
No, I felt the same way because I'll admit watching the movie, like I thought that was really weird, like how quick the relationship seemingly started. Like seemingly, I mean, in a movie that happens all the time because you only have like at most an hour and a half to try to explain something. But
Mm.
even for like this film, I was like that's a little quick, but okay, I'm not too out of it, but
Yeah,
a little too quick for me.
the only moment that comes to mind is just that he says she thinks she recognizes him,
Mm-hmm.
and then he admits that he's seen her as one of the top chefs on TV, and then she's charmed by that. But based on the performance, I wouldn't say she was like head over heels by that response. And
Yeah.
then, but to what you're saying, I guess like, yeah, I guess they had that whole like verbal and physical triggers to the hypnosis thing. So everything they were saying was making them fall in love more and more. But yeah, outside of the hypnosis, I was just like, this seems like what a 13-year-old boy, straight 13-year-old boy's imagination of, male female interaction might seem like, I guess. I don't know.
Nah, it
I mean,
definitely.
I think I know where you're going with that. I think that sort of checks out actually. Yeah.
Like a prepubescent or, in the midst of adolescence or something.
Right.
We also kind of like I had to remind myself like, yeah, this guy was basically in jail for like a good chunk of his life. Like well, not even like jail, like super jail, because he had no interaction whatsoever. Like it was nicer than your average like cell, but at least you could still like communicate with inmates and like technically parts of the outside world. Like no, you're just stuck in the studio apartment with no way out and just watching TV all day. So
yeah, solitary confinement,
right? That definitely would mess up one's psyche and just like I I absolutely love his interactions though. Like as soon as he got out of that situation, just I love the movie starts off with him like like stopping this guy from killing himself because he has to, like, no, you're the first guy I met in like ages. Like, I need to tell you my story. And also him and how he gets his glasses in the beginning with that lady in the elevator. Like, just all those great moments. I really like that. Didn't even listen to that guy's story. He told his story, but
Yeah,
it's the other guy's story.
I do love a lot of the like were the writer building the characterizations of this character, and then as the movie plays out, like seeing the effects of that. I had so many things that I was going to use as an example, and now all of them are gone. But they're like, he's watching television, so a lot of his references will be about TV. And at first, they start off small. It's like, he goes into this restaurant because he's familiar with the chef that he used to watch as part of his programming, day-to-day programming. And I'm like, oh, okay, that like makes sense. But then later, like, he only had so many interactions and things that he interacted with. So one of the things was like food. He's like, oh, I'm going to eliminate all the places in this area until I find the food that they were delivering to me while in the cell. Like, just stuff like that where I was like, oh man, like, oh, your imagination's so sexy. Like, that's so much fun. So like, little things like that, little nuggets like that throughout the film, and the characterization and all the stuff I thought were really neat.
For sure. Oh God. Go ahead.
What about those dumplings or pot stickers or whatever he was eating?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of those things. I think because in the film, like he finds out that like these are from a restaurant that is named Blue Dragon, and then he realizes it's a restaurant called Red Dragon or Blue Dragon. I think it's Blue Dragon, but it's like the Violet. Dragon. So like just that's the way that they deal with like food in this movie was also just gross. Like him eating all this fast food because that's all they gave him in the prison, and then him eating the live octopus because he wanted something that was fresh and alive. Like, that was real. And
that's pretty wild because it was real.
I love sushi, and right before that scene, I put in my Uber Eats order for sushi.
Oh, no!
Right before the scene.
Like, enough time to where I had my food in front of me, yeah, it was just a little too close. It was a little too close. I was like, oh man,
oh my God.
The sushi ain't sushiing for me anymore.
Can't have my sashimi. Oh God, as gross as that was, because that's commitment. He committed.
What a great shot at the end, though, right? When like it's in its mouth and passes out, and there's just a little squiggly coming out of his mouth. I'm just like, wow, what an amazing shot!
I didn't know that those things could like their appendages could still like. Is that like the same thing as like rigor mortis or something, or like is it still alive?
Seen people eat them. I've seen people eat them on YouTube videos, and when they eat them and they're chewing them and swallowing down, the tentacles are still like on the outside of their mouth, like trying to escape. Like they're still like doing this, like pulling on their face and stuff, trying to get out.
Oh my God,
it's wild.
Well,
that thing's fighting the whole time.
I believe it's the UK recently in the last like couple months announced that I forget the family kingdom name or whatever for these kinds of animals, but that they're now considered sentient beings and like have rights.
Oh no! I mean, yeah, an octopus is smart, but so are mammals.
Anyway, it was a lot.
Isn't it?
They did 27 takes of that. I'm just kidding.
I mean, they probably did do multiple takes, but oh my God,
that's a lot.
I mean, he does like throw up. He eats so many dumplings in a day, or pot stickers, or whatever. Are they dumplings or pot stickers?
I think my translation said dumplings.
Okay. See, he eats so many of them in a day, he's throwing up in an alley. You can't take it.
I think it's hilarious. Like he could take the octopus, but he couldn't take that. Well, I mean, he technically couldn't take the octopus. He passed out, but
True.
supposedly because he hasn't had enough sun, not enough vitamin C and D and E.
Is that why he wanted to eat something that was alive? He needed the different vitamins. What was the point behind that? What was he thinking?
He probably just wanted something other than those damn dumplings, to be honest.
I don't know.
He did say something alive though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But probably like just to feel something or like have like a sense of empowerment, you know?
But
Because
there,
like I think that'd be a kind of like a baller move. It's like I want to eat something while it's still feeling.
there is kind of a callback to it though, so I don't know if there's something to what you're saying, but
Maybe because he's a monster now.
Ooh, maybe.
Well, when he finally confronts the dude who's responsible for his imprisonment, he does say like, I'll eat you, alive or
Yeah,
something
like
like that.
there'll be nothing left. Nothing left of you on this earth because I would have chewed every single bit of you. I guess with that we could talk about the ensemble. It's not a big ensemble, but there are definitely some good side characters other than Dae-Su. We got the bad guy, Woo Jin Lee, the love interest who once again we're going into spoiler territory. And it turns out to be the daughter of our hero protagonist, where we like to call it, through all these twists and turns. Kind of comes at you out of nowhere. And then we have Mr. Han, who was the second in charge, and then like the prison the not the warden type guy who ends up losing his teeth. Yes, like just crazy amount of folks.
He gave me a
Yeah,
lot of
that-
levels for just being the warden.
I think
Right.
these characters. Had you watched this movie in like '03 or somewhere around there, I think these characters would have had a greater effect. I think they lose some of their steam over time because like what Raymond said, this movie has this comic booky vibe to it. It feels like a dark graphic novel
Mm-hmm.
because these characters are so like animated and so not cartoonish isn't the right word. I guess animated and just strange. They're just
Yeah.
comic booky. And because we've seen so many comic book movies now, it just sort of loses a little bit of its, not even a little bit, quite a bit of its edge. Because I remember seeing this years ago and like, this is so cool because there wasn't any comic book movies. Like, oh, this is sick. But now it's like, it's not that sick. It's kind of normal in a movie.
Yeah, I kind of feel that with the warden character because, like, surface level, you wouldn't think that he would have that much screen time. Like you would think right after the whole pulling out the teeth scene, that'd be the end of that. But
Yeah.
like we see his character a lot, and I feel like he's definitely that guy that feels comic booky since he changes like alliances a bit in the movie a few times. And at the end of the day, you find out even though he lost his teeth and his hand, it's all about the dollar. If you give him enough money, he'll give up anything. Like if money speaks, like he'll take it. He gave away his fucking hand for money and a new building. Like what? Like god damn. Like and I'm sure that was his right hand. So unless that guy was lefty, he gave up his dominant hand. That's the favorite hand that he gave away.
Yeah.
I have a quick Dino's sidebar corner of yesterday. I was talking to my mentor for 4 hours and telling her I want to work on this new sample, blah, blah, blah. I want it to be like dark and whatever. And without thinking about Old Boy at all, and I hadn't seen it yet. And I was telling her kind of my North Star is Watchmen, but I want it to be specific to my communities, and I want to find something historical and da 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 da. And then she was just asking a bunch of questions, just like an awesome mentor that she is. She's very tapped into her emotions, as am I. So she's like, well, what's given like the greatest responses from you? I'm like, what really just like, affects you? She's like, what and why and blah blah blah. And I told her like the two things that really affect me are like when I feel humiliation or when I feel rage, because both feel like, and I think sometimes they're connected, but both make me feel powerless, and then at the same time beside myself, like I don't know who this person is. And as I was watching this, and I've had this thought or like thing come to mind a few times in watching various movies or whatever, where it's like, this movie's so much about vengeance and these themes of like monster and humanity and da 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 da. Where I was like, wait, especially towards the end, where it's like vengeance for vengeance sake, and this guy's done this whole, like, we watched a movie recently where it was like they did this whole thing just so that they could say that they did this. What was that movie?
I think it might have been The Game.
Oh no, it was like recently someone goes like I made them fall in love with me. Oh, it's Lion in the Winter, when the French king goes like,
Yeah.
oh, I made your son fall in love with me just so that I could have this moment of telling you that it's all like a ruse or whatever. Where I go, damn, like if you really take that moment and like make it its own feature, like that is so much rage, and it starts to go into, and we're talking about comic book stuff, it just turns into evil and like evil for evil's sake. I don't know. And I was like, as much as it does affect me in certain ways, I do go like, and there have been really great films that play with those themes, but I do go, oh, what's the takeaway outside of like humanity can do evil things? I don't know. Anyway, that's my sidebar.
I mean, what you're really talking about is dangerous liaisons and cruel intentions, right? Like people just being cruel just for the sake of that they have the ability to do it.
Yeah, like the Joker, anarchy for anarchy's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, our dude definitely had a reason, but he had
Right.
the means and the whereabouts to implement those atrocities, and on a time constraint too. I like how time is a reoccurring theme in the movie. It even starts off like with the title sequences, like all these watches, and even the title card, like the letters in Old Boy, they move like a ticking clock. But I thought it was crazy how the bad guy, our villain, didn't expect our protagonist to fall in love so quickly with the daughter, but that was part of his vengeance scheme. It's like, well, how much time did you think this was gonna take? You only had a few days.
Well, I think maybe if he had infinite amount of time, maybe the natural human inclination might be to forgive. And he's like, I don't want to give him time to even like settle in or like fall in love with this girl or go visit his wife's grave or go like truly look for his daughter. I want him to just, because he's like, well, I got to focus on revenge right now. And then maybe like when he starts to like sort of get away from the idea of revenge, there's a time clock. Like, hey man, you got 5 days left, or you will never get your revenge. So now he has nothing else to think about. He's like, I have to like tap in. I got to like really tunnel vision into this one goal, or else I'm going to lose my one opportunity to get it done. I think there might also be something that's said. I've never noticed this before until you guys were just talking, but I think there might be something said about time and television in this thing, because early on in the movie is like, if you want to like keep track of a calendar, television is a great way to do that. It's a great time thing. I think maybe one of the messages in this movie that the filmmaker is trying to say is like, maybe don't waste your time watching television. You know what I mean? Like it's a huge time waster. You could waste 15 years of your life just watching television. I think you really could. If you watch television for a few hours every night, like I think most people probably do, you could lose a lot of your life. You could lose a decade of your life watching television for reals.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was too busy on my phone watching TV. What was that?
Precisely. Yeah.
And you did. I don't
Goodness.
know. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think that's a message in the movie? Is he trying to say that? Am I reading into it like from a weird place?
No, I think that might be a good takeaway. I thought it was weird because from what the movie kind of shows it, and even I think the Dae-Su thinks is that television was kind of like his only friend,
Mhm.
in the movie, because that's how he learned and that's how he ends up kind of beefing himself up, was just by analyzing the programs that he saw on TV. So kind of like how people go on this weird YouTube thing and all of a sudden they're obsessed with this one thing for a week because they found all that fucking YouTube. That's him for 15 years. So I
Do
guess it's a
people
good.
get obsessed on a thing on YouTube for a week still?
Oh, people still do. Yeah, I definitely do.
I
Like
used
what?
to in the early days, but like now it takes me like 1 or 2 nights and I get it out of my system.
Like what? What do you guys mean?
Oh,
Like like a
yeah.
YouTube wormhole.
Oh,
Like you end up on the weird
my
side of
YouTube
YouTube.
rabbit holes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're watching like pimple popping videos for 2 days.
Mine was like, um, my most recent one was oh, it started with something so like, oh, this is something Raymond would watch. It was like, well, no, I don't even remember what the initial thing was. I just remember the rabbit hole I got into. I forgot what the initial thing was, but it was a series of educational videos. But like the first one had sustenance, and then the rest of them were like, who owns the island that the Statue of Liberty sits on? Is it New Jersey or New York? And then I went from there, and kind of where I landed, hours later, was like a history of the crown from its inception to today.
Yeah.
And it was like, wait, what?
And then you
Dot
become
TV.
like a mini expert of all these stupid things for like a week, and for some reason it never retains. Like, you're an expert and stupid minute details that, like, I'm sure will be helpful on a trivia game show, but you forget that shit like within a week's time. Like, oh my god, I knew so much, I learned so much, and now I'm dumb again.
I will say, to caveat this bit of argument a little bit, is there's been studies that which is what I used to tell my parents when I was a kid. My parents would be so annoyed with me when I was younger because I loved watching National Geographic, and they would spill a bunch of like info about animals and space and dinosaurs and all these things. And as a kid, you're soaking up so much info, whether it's necessary or not. And so then my parents and I would be like talking and be like, oh, I learned this today, and they'd just be like, when is he gonna shut up? But a lot of science says that like that kind of attribute is actually like one about your retention for knowledge, and like seeking it's like a higher. As I say that in the most poorly put sentence together in English.
You say it's a higher,
No,
a higher using a higher.
Like you have a greater retention rate for keeping info if that's something you constantly do, and
Sure.
that behavior continues as you get older, so you constantly want more.
That's probably accurate. I'm
And
full
then,
of useless information. I got so much of it, it's ridiculous.
which is actually pretty good, like according to science. And then trivia games exist. So like a couple years ago, I one of my favorite game shows growing up was The Weakest Link, where I would learn more useless information. And they did a reboot with Jane Lynch, and I got on there. And then I told my parents, look, all those years of annoying you have amounted to something. I still lost, but I told them I'll go to the losers ladder, and then I'll win money. And yeah.
Nice.
I just recently talked about The Weakest Link. I'm too dumb for that show. You'll find me on Press Your Luck. That's how dumb I am. You're not gonna find
Love
me
that game too.
any of those other game shows. Oh
What
my
was the
god!
one where you would have like four multiple choice? It was Regis Philbin used to
Who
do
Wants
it.
to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah. I feel like I would have been pretty good at that.
We're now sidebarring again, but have you seen that video clip of the winner? It recently started doing its rounds again on social media, but it's the guy's doing the millionaire question, and he hasn't used his life support, whatever you call them.
Yes, and he uses
And he
it
calls
to,
his dad
yeah,
That was
to let
pretty
him know
sick.
that he's gonna win.
just
Yeah.
to gloat. Like that's a power
Yeah,
move.
that is so a sign of like internet times, like noob culture. Very
Yeah.
like I'm gonna do this thing. Like it's so silly. Anyway,
No,
I
I
think
remember
there
that.
is something to the TV thing. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe there is. There's a media consumption thing going there.
but
Yeah.
you know, at least with him, he retained that information. He remembered it. As to now, I don't think I can like at all. You know, in the modern age of internet, which is basically today's television, where there's such an oversaturation of information, you become a mini expert on everything you learn, and then you just forget and go on to the next thing.
So can we talk about the end of the movie yet, or what?
I think we should. We should talk about both the end and also the spoiler, the big twist that kind of I think completes the end of this movie. So we're gonna talk about the big spoiler of the film and how it ended. It ends kind of open to interpretation, but the big spoiler that everyone talks about regarding this film, you find out that Joe Jin Lin, I think his name is. I'm just gonna call them by like good guy, bad guy, because I can't get canceled if I don't have a career, but I don't want to be
That's
insensitive either.
that's fair.
So we find out that the bad guy of the film through this grudge, the reason why our good guy was imprisoned was he found out that he was having an incestuous relationship with his sibling, with his sister, whilst they were in high school, and thus everyone discovered this kind of intrepid detail, which led to the sister committing suicide. And as part of his whole revenge, our good guy ends up being tricked into having sexual relations with his daughter, whom he lost while imprisoned. So that's the big twist of the movie. I knew of the twist. I didn't know of the other incest thing. So when that showed up first, I was shocked. Where it's like, wow, this is delving into all the family fucking. Where one sees it as, well, we still love each other, as in, and one is like just forced upon, purely accidental. But oh my god, was the amount of it was gross. It-
So
It was a shock, yeah.
so this is what makes it very shocking, I think, and I hadn't considered that this until this time watching it. Um, and this kind of goes on par with what Raymond was saying when he said this movie had there's a nice thread of like it felt very cis male um storyline in here. Like there's a thread of that going on where it's just like, all right, but why? Like it's just like it just feels like maybe this movie wouldn't have been made that way today. There would have been some tweaks. There was a moment like where they kidnap her in her own apartment and like her boob is out, for like really no reason. You know what I mean? Like it could be for shock or whatever. And then like the sex scene, slightly gratuitous. And I start asking myself, like, is that because this is something that I ask myself now when I watch movies, like, how necessary is this sex scene? How necessary is this nudity? I'm watching it in this movie and I'm like, just doesn't feel that necessary. But then the ending reminds you of why it is so necessary to show them actually having sex and actually being naked. Because it makes that end when we find out that they're father and daughter so much more cringe and mind blowing. And like, you are one of the illest villains of all time. You know what I mean? Like,
I applaud the pettiness of this guy tricking him into saying that the pacemaker uh, on and off switch was for that, and instead was for him to relive that moment. It was disturbing, but I applaud that amount of evil.
yeah.
It's like, oh god, you are bad, aren't you?
Yeah, he's a baddie, man. This guy, if you think about it, I mean, as far as like evil villains go, he's got to be up there with some of the top 100 evil villains in movie history. Not that he does anything particularly evil throughout, but just his master plan is so wicked. To get to that ending, it's just like,
Yeah.
wow.
It's also insane because like when you find out that he had an incestuous relationship with his sibling, it's almost like the kink shamer is forcing the kink. I'm like you're gonna kink shame me. Well, I'm gonna force this kink onto you. How about that, jerk?
Yep, sure. Exactly. You're right.
It's much more deeper than that. But I thought as terrible and as disturbing as that was, the film, like you almost feel sorry for the guy who lost his sister. Is like, no, I mean that's still a pretty whack situation, but you almost feel sorry for it at the end.
I know
Almost.
it's dark. It's dark stuff.
I think I think what the kind of to what you were saying about the gratuitous sex thing. I feel like a lot of things that I didn't really care for in the film at least were consistent. And it made sense for the character that they built. And I know when, like, once this kind of turning point, huge reveal was coming, I was like, I don't know, y'all. Like, this seems like it's gonna be a lot. But then it happened, and what was so great about it was it went back to character, and it went back to like what is the worst case scenarios for both characters. And so then it made what I think would have been like a really bad ending for any given movie to just like throw in this like incestuous plot line, like because it tied so much to the vengeance and the, like losing his sister is the worst thing in the world for the main character. So what is the worst thing he could do for this person? Like it like really delivered on going back to character. It wasn't just like, I'm going to make this guy have sex with his daughter for no reason. It was like, oh, like he's so pissed off about da da da. He wants to make this person who judged him do the thing that he ruled, what the executioner, like he kind of is responsible for the loss of. I just thought it was really, really great of what I would have immediately been like, oh, you just trying to end this movie in like a flashy way. I was like, oh, you ended this in a flashy way that still tied to the story. So I was just very stunned. I was stunned, and I was like, no comments.
It was insane too, because before he even has that final encounter, Mito tells Dae-Su is like, you go in there and you make him beg. But it ended up being the other way around, where Ju like he came out on top, and Dae-Su, just by losing his goddamn mind, like humiliates himself in front of him, cuts out his own damn tongue, and like just it's insane, like just how crazy these two forces of nature just come to this end right here, and like no one really won. Like it's just an all around awful and just terrible situation.
Yeah. It's well, I'll save that for my final thought. But yeah, this thing, it kind of feels like the first time you watch it, it's all over the place, I think. And then it sort of happily ties together at the end. Like you sort of see what it was all about and what it was all for.
Yeah. Let's now let's talk about in my opinion, the second ending of this movie, because I feel like the film, if it just ended with that scene on its own, I think that would have been perfect, great. But then, of course, we go back to the hypnotist who tricked them all into doing all this crazy shit. Turns out, Dae-Su during the whole movie was narrating all this to the hypnotist in order to implore her to erase his memory, to forget that he and his daughter have relations, and the daughter still does not know. The movie doesn't say that she knows; it implies that she doesn't. But the film ends with like her stepping through him in his mind. Is like, okay, your one self, Dae-Su, is looking onto your second self, the monster. The monster will take a few paces forward each step is a year into his life, and once he finally goes to his final year of life, he will die, and you will no longer remember that you and your daughter did this horrible thing. And when he awakens from this trance, he is greeted by his daughter. She says that she loves him, but then they look back and they realize, wait, he walked up from where he was at, and the movie doesn't straight up say it, so it's left to the audience like, well, does he still remember? Which is awful if he does, but that's how that movie ends. Gives you that final thing. Is like up to the audience. Does this man live with the consequence of his actions, or does he not?
Yeah, you're right.
I think that the thing for me, kind of piggybacking off of my little first side corner thing, is just like this idea of like, what is the separation of beast from humanity? Like, where is that fine line, and what is that even? Are we, this guy was seeking vengeance. The person who put him in prison was seeking revenge. Like, isn't this just innately part of the human condition?
I think the answer to that is very kind of like pseudo-religious, pseudo-intellectual, or whatever, where, you would think that the right thing to do as a human being, since we have, we have a conscience compared to what we think of animals and whatnot, we have a choice to make. And the right choice would have been forgiveness or leaving this all behind, instead of taking action and trying to seek out vengeance, which is only a temporary feeling. Because that's how the baddie ends up losing, is he finds out that once he got his vengeance, there was nothing left for him to do. Like, that was it. That was his goal. He finished it, so he ended it. But now it's like, I think that's kind of like what the whole beast and humanity thing was. Like to be human is to, choose the righteous path, but to be a beast is to give in to your innate instinct and just fucking go murk everybody in your way. or everyone who has done you wrong.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty fair takeaway.
Man, that, as much as I did like that ending, I feel like the movie should have just ended at that scene with the elevator, him in the penthouse, the daughter just losing it with the box. But yeah.
Can we talk about how great that penthouse in like downtown Korea was?
That place was, fucking pools in his little area space. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was swank.
The opening and closing of the closet. Yeah. Also the buns. I was like, okay.
That guy was too comfortable being naked around his.
He really was.
Guard.
I'm here for it. Like, honestly, baddie. Like, original baddie.
Yeah.
I'm sure Mr. Han did not agree to that, but money talks.
I was pleasantly there was something that felt so like 1980s homoerotic about it, that I really respected. I was like, oh, this is interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I think I picked up on that vibe too a bit.
It's very weird.
Yeah.
Oh, but also, I guess if we do put it in context, like, villains up until the late 90s were usually queer coded, like, of course, so maybe it plays into that little vibe a little bit.
That's
Probably.
interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, it does feel like that though. It felt like this guy was just sort of like,
I mean, he does sleep with his sister, but I don't know, whatever.
I mean, he could have went any way he felt like it, because it was his world,
Yeah.
So many cameras in his penthouse too. Like,
yeah, like that. He's keeping an eye on things.
I feel like if my sister / lover, if the last portrait of her was her selfie of death, I don't think I would ever pick up a camera ever again.
That's the remake U.S. version contemporary take is Selfie of Death.
Oh god. Oh, we're gonna have to wait another few years for that because there is a U.S. remake made by
Have
Spike Lee,
Have y'all
starring.
seen it?
I have not. I tried to watch it one night, and I got about 5 minutes in and fell asleep. And I remember not liking the first 5 minutes, and I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to finish this thing.
Damn. Well, who
Maybe I
knows?
will though. Maybe I thought about it while I was watching this, and I'm like, maybe I'll go back and watch the Spike Lee one.
We'll do an Oye week where we revisit movies that we've seen that for some reason they decide to make a remake of. Kind of like how I did this one where we're gonna see a movie that is a sequel to movies that we have seen.
Mm.
But I am
Good
glad
idea.
that my magic dice picked this movie. So with that, let us go into our final thoughts.
Okay.
I'll go. Oh,
No, go ahead, Ray.
okay. I mean, when it is my first time watching it. It's my first intro to the Vengeance trilogy, and I know when it first opened up the movie, I was like, "Whoa, what a way to like enter in!" It almost looks like he's holding a gun, and then you realize, or I realized, that it's like a tie, and someone's hanging from the roof, and I was like, "Whoa, this is." Such an intro, and having talked about it with y'all, for this last hour, and how much of a bang it goes out in the end, I'm like, wow, like obviously there's a ton of ebb and flows, but to start so heightened and strong and end where it does, I do think it's definitely worth a watch. I get why it's on a lot of people's movie rec list, and I don't know if it's my favorite film, but I am definitely like thankful I watched it. I think there's a lot of elements to it that really surprised me. I could see how if ever I dabble in an action film that I end up directing, I'd definitely be like, how did Old Boy do it? Like, let's see the tricks in the bag. So yeah, recommend.
That's great. So I will say that after having watched it this time, the movie does lose a little bit of its luster because of time and because of the movies that have come out after this thing that have paid homage, whatever, little pieces of this thing. And this thing has definitely inspired a ton of filmmakers. Um, and people have put their own little twist on certain scenes and whatnot. So, and then the superhero thing that Raymond brought up, that's really huge, because this thing does play like a very dark comic, and it doesn't seem that shocking, which makes it a little less satisfying. Because this thing used to be like the chef's kiss of shocking cinema when it came out, and just like the epitome of cool and what you could do with storytelling, and like this thing it's wild, and it's deliberate, and it's free to just be itself. And I feel like a lot of filmmakers, outside of like the Tarantino school of filmmaking, they don't really have the courage to do a film like this. This film takes some courage because if not executed correctly, this could end your career. This type of movie, like a movie about incest, revenge is. I don't even know how you sell a thing like that. Like, but I'm very thankful that I don't remember his name. Park Wonk, whatever his name is. Doggone it. Park Chan-wook. I'm glad that he did get this thing made. I would recommend this thing to almost everybody who wasn't like approved. I'm not going to recommend it to anybody's mom. Uh, I'm not going to recommend it to like maybe church people. Uh, but I think I would recommend it to people who love film, people who love crazy storytelling, people who love revenge flicks, people who love foreign cinema, who have a stomach for a little bit of gruesome. Well, we're saying it's a little bit of gruesome. It's actually a lot, but if you watch a lot of movies like we do, maybe it's not, as gruesome. But there's some cringy moments as far as like, stuff that goes down in this thing. So will I watch it again? I would love to watch this movie again down the line, and I think I would love to watch it with somebody and share it and continue to have a dialogue about it. I can see myself going back and watching the other Vengeance trilogies, and it reminded me that I do want to explore more of this director's work in the future. So that's my final thought.
Ryu, my final thought. I would like to thank you guys all for. Oh my gosh, Raymond's gone. I'd like to thank all you guys for joining us into this discussion. I would like to give extra thanks to Jason for introducing us to the Vengeance trilogy. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't have seen Old Boy at all. This is it's dark. It's a disturbing picture, but if you are into, I think if you're really into noir, pulp movies, like, and even like Tarantino stuff, if you really like Tarantino stuff, you're gonna really like the Vengeance trilogy. I'm gonna recommend this movie along with the other two. I mean, if you guys seen this far into the video and you did not take my warning seriously, then like, what are you doing? Go watch all three films. But as I said before, I think I would recommend watching in the order that we have. Watch with Mr. Vengeance first, Lady Vengeance second, and then end it with Old Boy. I think this is a really good way to cap off your double feature movie night, even though it's more than one movie. All right, so that's all we got for us today. Before I pass this along, Des, I just want to know if you're still around. I got one question only for you. Jason has another one, but I want to ask you this one question. Spoilers and all. Would you like to finish this movie, especially knowing what's coming up?
Yeah, I would. Because when you guys were talking about the final part, I actually walked away from the computer. So no spoiled here.
Okay, no, we good.
Well done, Steve. Steve, I have a question for you. What do you got for us next week?
Next week, I don't know why you asked me, because it is not my turn. And it is, of course, not JP's turn because he just went. And if I haven't told Raymond, it's not his turn either. I haven't told him. I know he just had a heart attack. But Jason, if I haven't told you, that means it's not your turn. It is Michaela's turn. And Michaela actually is not today with JP like she usually is.
The ghost of Michaela.
She's actually here with me. Michaela.
I was expecting some twist. That would be so awesome.
Michaela, you wanna say your pick? Oh, hello guys. It's me, Michaela. Oh wait, I gotta hide my. It's me, Michaela. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on today.
She's
the
really
next movie is Day of the Dead.
Oh my gosh, I would have never seen that one coming.
So there you have it for me, Michaela in a hand. JP, Jason, Steve Des, and Raymond Arturo Perez. We'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.